I think there was a previous title that might have circulated on responsibility. I don't know if you saw that, but having realized that I was coming at the end of the day, I thought I had to give something slightly less heavy going than a formal analysis of responsibility based on analogies between distributed neural networks and other fancy things like that. So I thought, well, let me try to give a more general, abstract overview of some of the issues that I'm dealing with these days, and that are lying behind the project that has motivated this workshop. So from the specific topic to the workshop, to the workshop, to the project for the workshop, to the perspective that motivated the project, the workshop, and the topic. So basically what you're going to get in the next 19 minutes or so is a brief view of even the old thing, but a chapter in the book that concerns the overview that motivates the project, that motivates the workshop, that would have motivated the paper that I would have given. So having taken all these steps back, I hope it will not be too heavy going. And that's why we start with some pictures, so it should be entertaining. If you haven't seen this, this is of course the usual Wikipedia. The gentleman on the top right is famous. It's Francois Leclerc du Tremblay. Also known as the Eminence Grise. He was the advisor of Cardinal Richelieu, who was in turn Chief Minister to King Louis XIII. Why this data? First of all, because you might have read this in the Three Musketeers, so it's always interesting to know what you actually encountered. But mainly because he was the guy who influenced European policy for quite a while and quite substantially. I mean, we're talking about pre-post-Westphalian agreements. But he wasn't influencing the king, he was influencing the influencer who was influencing the king. So grey power has always been with us. It's just that grey power is the influencing power, but sometimes it's mistakenly taken to be the power that influences power. Not really, it's the power that influences those who influence the power. So 3 steps back. The question that I want to ask today is, well, in mature information societies like the UK and bits of Europe, what is the new morphology of grey power? Or to put it shortly, what is the morphology of power? And I can give away the answer immediately. The morphology of power is the morphology of uncertainty. You need to listen to the next 10 minutes because that sentence doesn't make any sense, I hope. So remember the morphology of power, and which power? The grey power, the 3 steps away from the real power, the forceful power with the soldiers, is the morphology of uncertainty in mature information societies. A few more steps back, classic philosophers move. What is power? And I think there was already this morning, we started with power, I think we end with power. There are really 3 kinds of power, and the only one of which is in question today. This poietic power, just to use a Greek word, is the power to create, annihilate something. And not even God in every tradition has that power. Only in some traditions, some gods have that power. Then there is the manufacturing power, the power to transform a reality into another different reality. Normally all gods have that, I mean, even the minor gods. And then they have cybernetic power in the Platonic sense of cybernetic, the guy who guides the boat in a particular direction, and it's the control over reality. Now, if that is confusing, some kind of a New Testament analogy here. You can create a stone out of nothing. Yeah, that's poietic. You can transform that stone into a piece of bread, any reference to real events, purely accidental. Normally you transform fish, something into fish and something. But, and that's manufacturing power. And of course, you can make it fly at some point, and that's cybernetic power. Now, of course, socio-political power is mainly cybernetic. It's not so much, and I'm not oversimplifying, generalizing, but you can see where we're going. It's not so much about poiesis, it's not creating out of nothing, and it's not so much manufacturing, but it's very much, mainly, a lot of it is in doing cybernetic control. If it is control, and I hope you kind of agree with me, then power, in the context that we need to discuss today, socio-political power is the socio-political ability to control, influence people's behavior through the creation, control of things, goods, services, or information about things, laws, news. Well, that was the old sort of system. We had people, you want to influence people, the power to influence people relies on creating goods and services at some point, or information about goods and services. In liberal societies, awash with cheap goods and free information, information about things, they are really free and they don't cost much. Power is changing and is exercised on something else. It's really exercise about which questions can be asked and what answers can be received, and therefore transparency, privacy, right to be forgotten, freedom of speech, ownership rights. It's all about who can control the questions, which then generates the information, which then influences the things, which then is used to influence behavior. So the thesis here is that in mature information societies, great power is stepping even further back into the darkness, so that not only is it less visible, but it's influencing things from a very, very long distance in a domino effect. So the new morphology of power, as I said, is the morphology of uncertainty. I need to tell you something about uncertainty. And because we are in Oxford, Alice comes quite useful. That's a very special Alice. If you want to know more, it's a disturbing Alice. I hope you didn't play with that Alice, but in case I'll tell you more later. All you have to notice is that there's a skull here. So, but that kind of Alice, insane, just came out of the asylum, starts going around killing people. Well, there are things that she knows, things that, such as there's a monster hiding, and that's why she's afraid. And that's her information. There are things that she knows that she does not know. Where is the monster? If she knew it, no, she wouldn't be looking for it. So that's incipience for the sophisticated among us. Or things that she's not quite sure she knows, whether her weapons is sufficiently powerful to kill the monster. We put everything together, that would be specifically uncertainty, but let's put uncertainty and incipience in one block. That's uncertainty. And of course, there are things that she doesn't even know that she doesn't know, famous unknown unknowns. For example, she doesn't know that there is a sword that can kill the monster. She hasn't even got the question about that. More dynamically, she's informed when she has the question, the answer, and therefore she has the information in question. She's uncertain when she has only the question, depending on whether she has no answer whatsoever or she has a few answers, she doesn't know which is the right answer to that question. That's the uncertainty for you. And by the way, if you discuss this with other people, they will hugely disagree with you in terms of, oh, that's a really strange definition of uncertainty, especially the game theory people. But I think it makes a lot of sense within a philosophical context. Of course, she is ignorant if she doesn't even have the question, and that's a good way of putting it for some students. I wish they had at least their question in mind, sometimes. So her uncertainty is a matter of power. Who puts those questions in her mind? Who, later on, can provide the answers to the questions that she is and she isn't allowed to ask? So what kind of power is emerging within mature information societies? That's where I was trying to explain the morphology of power comes in terms of morphology of uncertainty. So power in mature information societies is not just about things. Good old days when being a car maker didn't mean go and beg the government to be saved from bankruptcy. You were the guy who was influencing the influencers. No, that was another time. When the barons in the States were running the system. Then we moved to information about things, and that's the Watergate scandal, when the Washington Post was not bought by the owner of Amazon, was actually influencing the power. Today I think is about uncertainty, namely the questions shaping the answers, giving rise to information about things. The rest of the talk is basically an attempt to defend this thesis, but just so that you have something to take home, this should sound extreme. I won't tell you where it comes from, but it should really look and sound familiar. In mature information studies, those who control the questions shape the answers, and those who shape the answers control reality. And of course, it's a rewording on 1984 about the future, the present, the past. Why is that so? Well, in what way? In mechanisms make this possible, if that's even close to truth. First of all, we have already heard this. There's a mechanism called two-sided markets. American Express, Adobe, eBay, Facebook, Sony, Skype, Google, they all use that. It's well known, so I won't bother you. This is just an email that I got recently. In 2015, Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicle. Facebook, the world's most popular media, owns it, creates no content. Alibaba, Ebn, etc. You got the picture. I mean, there's no point in explaining this to this crowd. So these two-sided markets, they don't own the stuff. I mean, they don't create the stuff. They're not controlling the world by the creation of things. And they don't, and I hope now this is clear, they don't control the world. They are not great power because they create information. I mean, the difference between Wikipedia and Google is that Wikipedia has zero power whatsoever, whereas Google, but Wikipedia puts the content there, whereas Google allows you to get the content. Gatekeeper sometimes is mistaken as information owner. Not at all. I mean, in fact, these days, who is more powerful, the newspapers or Google in Spain, when he tells them, okay, I'll walk out of this business, thank you, and they go back. No, please, sorry, we were joking. We didn't really mean what we meant. Come back. Second mechanism, commodification in a Marx theory, the return of the old guy. If you read just the bottom line instead of the long things, it's making things unsaleable at some point, or not yet saleable. Assignment of economic value to something not previously considered in economic terms, transformation of goods, etc., etc. Well, keep in mind this first thing, this first meaning of commodification. There's another sense of commoditization in business theory, which is, again, if you look at the bottom, making saleable things we're already selling and buying, so generic the customers perceive little or no value difference between brands or versions. I don't care which fridge it is. I mean, it's a white good. It's this or that. I mean, who makes it? I couldn't be bothered less. Now, these two mechanisms, and I'm getting to the point, get unified into a commoditization, first word, my own making, which is a strategy that uses the Marxist commodification of users as data subjects and the commoditization of goods and services in order to acquire and maintain power. Examples. If readers and books are commodited, then you want to make sure that those who control the controllers, namely those who produce the books, are not really out of business, but no, they're cheap. And that's where Amazon has a real power on publishers. In fact, the arm-twisting policies of Amazon is exactly to make sure that the old great power, the power that was exercising influencing power on the influencers, which was the power of either owning the information or owning things, is undermined by getting, in fact, both things, cheap goods, and information as cheap as possible. And of course, whoever makes books freely accessible, searchable, is in a position of power. See Google and the digitization libraries. I mean, as I said, Google is supporting these workshops, so I'm glad. But you have to say, how come that someone like Google wants to make books and all over the place so free? Well, surely because they're nice guys. And, it's not but, and because it does undermine any other great power which was based on having privileged access or even ownership of that information. If you are my opponent and your ability to exercise great power on society is linked to goods, then I make sure that those goods are almost worthless, because then I will be able to, through access to those goods, make my power more visible. And if your power is the power of information, then I make sure that you, the library, the book seller, the journalist, are not in a position of power, because whatever you can provide, anyone else can provide for free. This is not complete, because there is a third mechanism. Gift economy as a competing strategy. You need to make sure that all this is sustainable. But how do you do that? Well, that's a beautiful trick, and I hat off to California for having done this. You hijacked the gift economy. Someone has to pay for this. If you make everything free, and I know it's not free, but I mean dirt cheap, really cheap, The goods are cheap, the information is cheap. You provide only access to goods and information. You are the one who controls uncertainty. Well, someone has to sustain your business. How do you sustain your business? Well, you make it sustainable by the very people you are undermining. And who are these? These are the analog people. The analog people, the guy who has to sell the white good, the fridge, has to pay you advertisement to make sure that his fridge is more visible. He has to play a signaling game. The signaling game, it requires advertisement. I don't signal without signaling. How do I signal? By advertising. Who is in the advertising business? Well, this new grey power. So I give money to you to undermine me, because the more money I give to you, the more power you have, the more my poor fridge, my poor book will be dirty cheap. So this wonderful system makes sure that the industry is kept alive through advertisement, which is about the Swedish GDP worth every year. So that's the cake for which they are fighting, about $600 billion. The thing is that in this particular context, you also have an extra benefit. Because in the two-sided network economy, the users don't pay for your services. Your services are paid through advertisement. Advertisement is a self-regulating industry, basically industry feeding itself. Well, the users are users. They're not voters because they didn't vote for it. They're not citizens because they have no that kind of rights. But they're not customers either. I mean, I heard so many times the standard reasoning: if you don't like it, it's a gift. You can walk out, get it somewhere else. You don't like that particular service as an email service, that particular service as a search engine. Well, there are other people offering it around the corner. So this is basically the perspective. And someone may think, oh, that's a lot of philosophy, not real practical bite. So I think I can add a little bit of facts, but we heard enough today to go in the same direction. September the 4th, 2014, the White House names Megan Smith, a Google executive, as its new Chief Technology Officer, and Alexander McKillivray, a lawyer who had joined Twitter, etc., the Deputy CTO. Now these, if anyone, are people who are exercising a lot of great power in our world. And we have already heard about the first quarter of 2015. Google became, for the first time, the company that spends the most money on lobbying the US federal government, surpassing defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and energy firms like ExxonMobil Corp. This is the way it looked. Having said that, so this is Google here, and it was more than all the other big guys that I mentioned. Of course, I'm talking about companies. Having said that, if we look more down the road, the second quarter, Google actually spent a little bit less. And if we look at the whole perspective, it's too far away to be read by you, but it's still the Chamber of Commerce that spends most of the money. Google is only number 10, but in terms of single companies, it's only Boeing and General Electric that come first and second. So went down from being the first to being the third in the list. We're still talking about a lot of influential power exercise behind the scenes. So conclusion is, there was a time when we spoke about how life on this planet has prehistory. This is normally about 6,000 years ago, when we consider that almost nobody had a way on this planet to convey current information to future generations. There was basically no writing. Could have been something else, but writing was the technology that we invented. So prehistory still applies to any society that is such that it doesn't have a technology today to make sure that information today can be consumed by generations far away, unless you use some simple biological transmission, biological memory. So there are a couple of places in the Amazonian region that are still prehistorical. So it's not an age, it's a state of a society. We move from prehistory to history when we start relying on more intensely on technologies that can convey, record and transmit information to the future. So record and transmit is here, started about 6,000 years ago in our world. And this means that individual well-being and social welfare starts being connected to the presence of technology. Once you move, and that's us basically now, Once you move from history to hyperhistory, this means that our reliance on technologies is not just a connection of welfare and well-being, it's a dependency of welfare and well-being on technologies. And this proof of this is cyber war. It means that if a society can be put on its knees by a cyber attack, it's a hyper-historical society. So it's not the end of history, it's more history. We were historical, now we are hyper-historical. In this context, history, especially modern history, is the age of certainty and information as values. This is the time when, from Richelieu onwards, your usual Kant, is where, Descartes is all about reaching certainty 100%. If you're not certain, you are out of the business. But I would argue in a different context, because we come to an end now, the hyperhistory is the age of uncertainty, and those who control uncertainty control society. And shared ignorance is more of a value than information. Open questions, and that's the last slide. Politics between legal genesis and economic future. What is the human project? That's our politics as we do it today. We either discuss it in terms of legal genesis, some kind of democracy, etc., blah, blah, or economic future, welfare, GDP, growth, innovation, etc. But the truth is that we don't have, as Western societies, hyper-historical places, mature information societies, a real human project now. That's because of the lack of big narratives. We know that we have politics on demand. We don't have a politics always on, no more. We have moved from opt-out as a citizen to opt-in. I normally don't care unless I'm motivated. The marketization of politics is going to play a big role in this grey power organization of influences. And finally, all this is happening in a context where we know that there's a dematerialization of our culture. You don't buy underwear, you buy in Calvin Klein. It doesn't matter what kind of underwear it is. What you really care is the logo on it, super dematerialized. And the trend from ownership, property rights therefore, which is a classic in Brussels, to use rights, which is not a classic in Brussels, because Brussels is stuck in modernity. That's the question that we need to address. But with that, I thank you for your attention.